Dear students, welcome to the Medical Genetic course. By the end of this video, you are expected to know mechanisms of birth defects, identify important terminologies in medical genetics, classify patterns and types of birth defects, illustrate etiological background, identify dysmorphology, understand clinical examples of genetic causes of birth defects. We can define birth defects as congenital malformations, which are single or multiple defects of the morphogenesis of organs or body districts identifiable at birth or during the intrauterine life. Their global birth prevalence is about 2 to 3%. There are many mechanisms of birth defects: malformations, disruptions, deformations, sequences, and syndromes. The first mechanism, we will talk about malformations. It's a primary error of morphogenesis, usually multifactorial. An example, congenital heart disease. The second birth defect is deformation, originally intact, but an extrinsic mechanical force caused this deformation. The third birth defect is disruptions. Secondary disruption of previously normal organ or body region. It could be vascular or infectious cause. An example, amniotic band syndrome. The fourth mechanism of birth defect is dysplasia, abnormality of the microscopic structure or abnormality of the microscopic structure and function of a tissue, usually have an evolutionary character of the function of a tissue. In genetic, there is 3 main patterns of birth defects: association, sequence, and syndromes. What is the difference between sequence and syndrome? In medicine, a sequence is a series of ordered consequences due to a single cause. It differs from a syndrome, and that seriality is more predictable. If A causes B, and B causes C, and C causes D, then D would not be seen if C is not seen. What is the difference between syndrome and association? Syndrome is a recognizable pattern of signs and symptoms that run together. Typically differs from an association in that a molecular cause has been elucidated. The other question we can ask, can an association become a syndrome? Yes. For example, CHARGE syndrome previously was an association prior to the discovery of the causative gene, CHD7. We will talk about sequence, which is one of the patterns of birth defects. It's a complex damage secondary to an isolated anomaly. The sequence starts from a single localized anomaly in early morphogenesis. Then, secondary anomaly happened, which will lead to a pattern of multiple anomalies in later morphogenesis. Here an example in the photo of Pierre-Robin sequences, which is a rare congenital birth defect characterized by an underdeveloped jaw, backward displacement of the tongue, and the upper airway obstruction. The most common and the well-known pattern of birth defects is syndromes. Syndromes are recognizable patterns of anomalies that are pathogenetically related. There is 3 rules of dysmorphology. No malformation is pathogenomic of a syndrome. No malformation is constant in a syndrome. As a rule, the presence of an unexpected malformation does not allow to exclude a given syndrome. Here an example in the photo we can see trisomy 13 or Patau syndrome, which is a good example of birth defect. We have holoprosencephaly, a cleft palate, and a clenched hand and feet. In birth defects, there is 2 main etiological classification of congenital malformations. First, primary, genetic causes, or secondary, due to environmental causes. Many genetic causes of birth defect. It could be chromosomal abnormalities, either numerical or structural, monogenic point mutations, epigenetic regulation, imprinting defect, uniparental disomies, or triplet amplifications. There is also polygenic and secondary environmental causes. It could be biological agent, physical agent, vascular disruptions, or mechanical causes. Here is a list of some references if you would like to read more. At the end of this video, we have talked about mechanism of birth defects, important terminologies in medical genetics, patterns and types of birth defects, etiological background, dysmorphology, clinical examples of genetic causes of birth defects.